They call it rungsu, the study of running away. It's a term that exploded across Chinese social media in 2022, a darkly humorous play on words that captures something profoundly serious: the growing desperation of China's wealthiest citizens to escape their own country. In a nation that once celebrated the motto, "to get rich is glorious," being wealthy has become something far more dangerous. A target painted on your back in a system where billionaires can vanish overnight without explanation, where fortune built over decades can be seized with the stroke of a bureaucrat's pen, where criticizing the wrong policy can cost you everything. And where are they running to? Increasingly, the answer is Australia. The numbers tell a staggering story. According to Henley and Partners, China has hemorrhaged more millionaires than any other nation on Earth for over a decade, with a record 15,200 high net worth individuals fleeing the mainland in 2024 alone. Meanwhile, Australia has consistently ranked as one of the world's top destinations for migrating millionaires, welcoming over 82,000 wealthy individuals in the past 2 decades. The Significant Investor Visa Program, before its abolition in 2024, saw 85% of its applicants come from China, wealthy families willing to invest $5 million for a chance at Australian residency. But this isn't simply a story of money seeking better returns. This is a story of fear, of families watching business titans disappear into the Communist Party's network of black jails, of entrepreneurs who built empires only to see them dismantled by regulatory crackdowns, of parents desperate to give their children futures free from the crushing pressure of China's hyper-competitive education system, of the super rich calculating that the clean air of Sydney, the beaches of Melbourne, and the safety of a nation with no inheritance tax is worth any price. What's driving this unprecedented exodus? Why are China's wealthiest choosing a continent on the other side of the world as their escape hatch? And what does it mean when a country's most successful citizens are desperate to leave? We're counting down the 10 most powerful reasons why Chinese billionaires are fleeing to Australia, from the obvious attractions of lifestyle and education to the darker motivations of survival and fear. By the time we reach number 1, you'll understand why for China's elite, getting out isn't just about getting ahead, it's about getting away alive. Stick around to discover what's driving the greatest wealth migration in modern history. Kicking off our countdown at number 10 is something that might surprise you. It's not about tax advantages or investment returns, it's about children. Specifically, it's about giving them a future that doesn't involve studying 77 hours a week. In China, the pressure on young people is almost unimaginable. The Gaokao, the National College Entrance Examination, determines everything. A single test score decides whether a child enters an elite university or faces a lifetime of diminished prospects. The competition is so fierce that high school students routinely spend more hours studying each week than most adults spend at their jobs. 77 hours. That's 11 hours a day, 7 days a week, of relentless academic pressure. And even then, the odds are brutal. Millions of students competing for a handful of spots at top universities. For wealthy Chinese families, Australia offers an escape from this crushing system. The country's universities rank among the world's finest, with the prestigious group of 8 institutions attracting students from across the globe. But it's not just academic quality driving these families southward, it's the philosophy. Australian education emphasizes balance, creativity, personal development, the radical notion that children should have time for friends, for sports, for learning to swim. According to data from Juwai IQI, the leading platform tracking Chinese property investment, the demographics of Chinese buyers in Australia have shifted dramatically. 9 out of 10 are now purchasing properties to live in rather than as pure investments. The driving force behind this transformation is overwhelmingly educational. Parents are establishing homes years before their children reach university age, creating anchor points for eventual family migration. They're not just buying real estate, they're buying their children's futures. Sydney real estate expert Peter Lee has observed this phenomenon firsthand. These families want their children to experience what he calls an Australian-style childhood. They want them to have balance, to develop as complete human beings rather than test-taking machines. For parents who built fortunes through relentless work, the greatest gift they can give their children isn't more money. It's the freedom to be young. Education opens doors, but what keeps wealthy Chinese families permanently rooted in Australia goes far deeper than universities and test scores. It starts with something as fundamental as breathing. Coming in at number 9 is a factor so basic, we often take it for granted. Air. Clean, fresh, unpolluted air. China's major cities rank among the most polluted on Earth. Beijing's infamous smog regularly reaches levels the World Health Organization classifies as hazardous. Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, the engines of China's economic miracle, all suffer from air quality that poses serious long-term health risks. For billionaires who can afford anything, the one thing money cannot buy in China is a clear sky. Australia offers the opposite. Pristine beaches stretching for thousands of kilometers, national parks filled with ancient forests, cities consistently ranked among the world's most livable. Sydney and Melbourne don't just offer good weather, they offer the kind of outdoor lifestyle that Chinese megacities cannot replicate no matter how much infrastructure they build. This explains the transformation of Sydney's most exclusive suburbs into enclaves of Chinese wealth. Point Piper, Vaucluse, Mossman, names that once signified old Australian money now increasingly represent new Chinese fortunes seeking sanctuary. No transaction better illustrates this phenomenon than Chow Chak Wing's purchase of La Mer. In 2015, the Chinese-Australian property developer and Kin Gold Group chairman paid $70 million for the Vaucluse mansion, previously owned by James Packer. The sale set a new Australian residential record. But the most remarkable detail wasn't the price. It was that Chow reportedly never even viewed the property before buying it. He simply wanted to upgrade to something bigger for his growing family. When you're worth billions and seeking escape from polluted skies, $70 million for harbor views and clean air seems like a reasonable trade. Chow wasn't alone in his thinking. Point Piper attracted an extraordinary concentration of Chinese wealth. His neighbors included Zheng Wei, son of former Chinese Vice President Zheng Qinghong, and Chu Yafu, chairman of global textiles giant Shandong Ruyi. Trophy homes changed hands at dizzying prices as China's elite voted with their feet and their fortunes for Australian sunshine over Chinese smog. The contrast is stark. From 77-hour study weeks and pollution masks to harbor views and weekend beach trips. For families who have everything except quality of life, Australia offers something their homeland cannot match. But lifestyle alone doesn't explain the urgency driving this migration. For many wealthy Chinese, Australia offers something more primal than clean air or good schools. It offers distance from a world growing increasingly dangerous. At number 8, we encounter a factor that rarely makes headlines, but weighs heavily on every billionaire's calculations: geographic safety. Look at a map, and Australia's appeal becomes immediately obvious. The continent sits isolated at the bottom of the world, separated from global conflict zones by vast oceans. The Taiwan Strait tensions that could erupt into superpower confrontation lie thousands of kilometers to the north. The instability of the Korean Peninsula feels comfortably remote. The refugee crises and regional conflicts affecting Europe and the Middle East belong to another hemisphere entirely. Henley and Partners, The global investment migration advisory firm explicitly identifies distance from crisis hotspots as a key factor driving wealthy migration to Australia. For billionaires managing global empires, this geographic isolation offers a rare combination: close enough to Asian markets for business, far enough for safety. This isn't paranoia, it's prudent planning. South Korean millionaires, living under the shadow of North Korean threats, have been fleeing southward in increasing numbers. 1,200 were projected to leave in 2024 alone, with Australia and the United States among their top destinations. When you've built a fortune over decades, protecting it from geopolitical catastrophe becomes paramount. Australia's remoteness, once considered a disadvantage in the age of global commerce, has transformed into its greatest strategic asset. In an era of rising tensions and uncertain alliances, being far from everywhere dangerous starts to look like being close to everything that matters. Geographic safety protects against external threats, but there's another form of protection Australia offers, one that ensures wealth survives not just wars, but generations. At number 7, we arrive at something that sounds dry, but represents one of the most powerful wealth magnets on Earth. Australia has no inheritance tax, no estate tax, no death duties, and for billionaires planning to pass fortunes across generations, this single fact changes everything. Australia abolished its inheritance taxes in 1979, when Queensland led the charge and other states followed. By 1985, the nation had completely eliminated death duties, becoming one of the first wealthy countries in the world to do so. At the time, the move was driven by domestic politics. Modest family homes had become valuable enough to trigger punishing tax bills, and voters demanded relief. But decades later, this decision has transformed Australia into a global haven for dynastic wealth seeking escape from confiscatory taxation elsewhere. The contrast with other destinations is stark. The United States imposes a federal estate tax of 40% on large inheritances. The United Kingdom levies the same rate. Japan, home to some of Asia's wealthiest families, charges up to 55% on inherited fortunes. For a billionaire worth $1 billion, these taxes represent potential losses of $400 million or more. Wealth that took a lifetime to build, sliced nearly in half by a single government claim at death. Henley and Partners, in their analysis of why Australia consistently ranks among the top destinations for migrating millionaires, explicitly identifies the absence of inheritance taxes as a crucial advantage. Alongside lifestyle, education, and safety, the firm lists this tax benefit as a fundamental reason wealthy families choose Australia over competitors like the United Kingdom and United States that might otherwise seem more attractive. For Chinese billionaires specifically, the calculus carries additional urgency. China itself has no inheritance tax, but that could change. For years, rumors have circulated that Beijing is considering implementing estate duties as part of broader wealth redistribution efforts. The specter of Xi Jinping's Common Prosperity campaign has only intensified these fears. Why wait to discover what new taxes might emerge when you can relocate wealth to a jurisdiction that has already made its position clear? The numbers involved are staggering. Chinese families sitting on fortunes worth hundreds of millions of dollars face a simple question. Do they keep their wealth in a system where the rules change without warning and billionaires disappear into detention? Or do they transfer it to a stable democracy where property rights are protected by law and generations can inherit without government confiscation? Australia's answer to that question has attracted wealth from across Asia. Hong Kong abolished its inheritance tax in 2006. Singapore followed in 2008. These financial centers compete fiercely for Chinese capital, but Australia offers something the Asian city-states cannot match: distance from Beijing's reach. combined with a lifestyle that makes permanent relocation genuinely appealing rather than merely financially optimal. For China's wealthiest families, Australia represents the ultimate wealth shield, a place where fortunes built over decades can survive intact for generations, where children and grandchildren will inherit what their parents and grandparents created, where the government has made a binding commitment, sustained for over 4 decades, that death will not trigger destruction of family wealth. But getting money into Australia requires a pathway, and for over a decade, one visa program served as the golden ticket for China's wealthy seeking Australian shores. Breaking into our top 5 at number 6 is the program that defined Chinese wealth migration to Australia for an entire generation. They called it the Significant Investor Visa. Insiders knew it as the Golden Ticket, and for 12 years, it served as the primary escape route for Chinese fortunes fleeing to Australian safety. The program began in 2012, introduced by Julia Gillard's Labour government, with a straightforward proposition: invest 5 million Australian dollars in approved funds, and Australia would grant you residency. No English language requirement, no upper age limit, minimal obligation to actually live in the country, just 40 days per year. The pathway to permanent residency and eventually citizenship lay open to anyone wealthy enough to write the check. The response from China was overwhelming. Over the program's lifetime, 85% of all applicants came from mainland China. More than 2,300 significant investor visas were issued, funneling $11.7 billion into the Australian economy. Chinese families saw the program as insurance against uncertainty at home, a backup plan, a second passport for children, a foothold in a stable democracy. Even the visa's subclass number seemed designed for Chinese sensibilities. Subclass 888. In Chinese culture, 8 is the luckiest number, symbolizing prosperity and wealth. 3 8s in a row? Practically an invitation. Whether intentional or coincidental, the numbering reinforced the program's appeal to its overwhelmingly Chinese clientele. But the golden ticket came with complications. Critics argued the program amounted to selling citizenship to the highest bidder, regardless of what those bidders might represent. Concerns mounted about money laundering, about corrupt officials parking illicit funds in Australian real estate, about foreign influence seeping into Australian institutions through donor relationships. The case of Huang Xiangmo crystallized these fears. The Chinese billionaire property developer arrived through business visa pathways, established himself in a $12.8 million Mosman mansion, and donated $2.7 million to Australian political parties. He was photographed with prime ministers and opposition leaders. His family became Australian citizens. Then, in 2019, authorities canceled his permanent residency and barred his re-entry on national security grounds, citing alleged links to Chinese Communist Party influence operations. By 2024, the program's fate was sealed. Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neill announced its abolition, calling it part of a broken system that the Labour government had inherited. The Productivity Commission had concluded that prioritizing wealthy investors over skilled migrants actually cost the Australian economy $3.4 billion. The golden ticket was revoked, yet the story may not be over. At a private fundraiser in February 2025, opposition leader Peter Dutton told migration agents he thought the program would return. The appetite for Chinese investment hasn't disappeared. The debate continues over whether Australia should welcome wealthy migrants regardless of origin, or whether some fortunes carry risks that outweigh their benefits. The Golden Visa opened doors for legitimate investors seeking Australian futures. But for many wealthy Chinese, the appeal goes beyond paperwork and visa categories. It's about tangible assets they can see, touch, and secure against an uncertain future. At number 5, we reach the most tangible expression of Chinese wealth migration, Australian property, not just as investment, but as sanctuary, as insurance policy, as proof that your fortune exists somewhere beyond Beijing's reach. The scale of Chinese investment in Australian real estate defies easy comprehension. For years, China has ranked as the largest foreign buyer of Australian residential property, outpacing every other nation by substantial margins. In the 2022 to 23 financial year alone, Chinese investors received approval for $3.4 billion in residential property purchases. Credit Suisse research found that mainland buyers accounted for 23% of new home sales in Sydney and 20% in Melbourne. In a single quarter of 2023, Chinese investors poured $700 million into Australian homes. But the raw numbers don't capture the transformation occurring in Australia's most exclusive suburbs. Point Piper, Vaucluse, and Mosman have become de facto Chinese billionaire colonies, their harborfront mansions trading hands at prices that shatter records with stunning regularity. The transactions read like a roll call of Chinese wealth seeking Australian shelter. Chow Chak Wing's $70 million purchase of La Mer from James Packer. Wang Zhijun of Qingdao and Tayson Group paying $52 million for the Altona mansion on Point Piper, then carving it up and selling pieces for over $78 million total. The Huang family acquiring waterfront property for more than $60 million. Each sale pushing Australian residential records higher, each buyer seeking the same thing: a piece of Australia they could call their own. No case better illustrates both the appeal and the perils of this flight than Xu Jiayan's attempt to establish an Australian foothold. In late 2014, the chairman of Evergrande, then one of China's largest property developers, quietly purchased Villa del Mare on Point Piper for $39 million. The limestone mansion commanded panoramic harbor views from one of Sydney's most coveted addresses. Xu's new neighbors included the son of a former Chinese vice president. For a man whose net worth would eventually peak at $45 billion, making him China's richest person, the purchase seemed routine. But Xu made a critical error. His company acquired the property through a shelf company called Golden Fast Foods Pty Ltd, failing to notify the Foreign Investment Review Board as required. When authorities discovered the violation, Treasurer Joe Hockey ordered divestment within 90 days. It was the first such order in nearly a decade, and it sent a clear message. Australia welcomed Chinese wealth, but only on Australian terms. Xu sold the mansion for $40 million, netting a small profit despite the forced sale. At the time, it seemed a minor embarrassment for a man worth billions. No one could have predicted what lay ahead. The shift in Chinese buyer behavior tells its own story. According to Juwai IQ's data, 9 out of 10 Chinese purchasers now buy Australian properties to live in rather than as pure investments. They're not flipping real estate for profit. They're establishing homes, creating anchor points for families, building lives outside China's borders. As Daniel Ho of Juwai IQ observed, most are waiting until they have permanent residency before purchasing. When you're planning to stay forever, the additional costs of buying as a non-resident become unnecessary burdens. Property provides physical security for wealth in ways that financial instruments cannot match. You can see a house, touch its walls, watch your children play in its garden. No government database can make it disappear with a keystroke. For Chinese billionaires accustomed to systems where assets can be frozen without warning, Australian real estate offers something precious: permanence. But the most compelling reason for flight isn't about what Australia offers, it's about what China threatens. And nowhere is that threat more visible than in the catastrophic collapse of the very industry that created so much Chinese wealth. At number 4, we confront the economic earthquake that has devastated Chinese billionaires and sent many scrambling for any exit they can find: the property crisis that threatens to consume everything they built. China's real estate sector represents somewhere between 20 and 25% of the entire national economy. For decades, it was the engine of growth, the creator of fortunes, the foundation of middle-class wealth. Developers built apartment towers as fast as they could pour concrete. Families invested their life savings in units that existed only as architectural renderings. The system seemed unstoppable. Then it stopped. The collapse of Evergrande became the symbol of everything going wrong. $300 billion in debt, the most indebted property developer on earth, thousands of projects unfinished, millions of families who paid for apartments that may never be completed. When the giant fell, it sent shockwaves through the entire Chinese economy that continue reverberating today. The destruction of wealth has been staggering. According to Forbes, Chinese billionaires collectively lost $500 billion in a single year. The number of Chinese billionaires plummeted from 1,185 at the 2021 peak to just 753, a 36% decline in 3 years. The 5 richest property tycoons in China lost approximately $65 billion between them over 2 years. The Huron Rich list has shrunk for an unprecedented 3rd consecutive year. No fall captures the vertigo of this collapse better than Xu Jiayin himself. The man forced to sell his Point Piper mansion in 2015 once stood atop Chinese wealth with a fortune of $45 billion. By 2023, Bloomberg estimated his net worth had cratered by 96%. He sold personal assets, including a $227 million London mansion, trying to prop up his failing empire. In September 2023, police took him into custody. By March 2024, he was banned from China's markets for life and fined $6.5 million for overstating company revenue by $78 billion. The broader economic picture offers little comfort. Youth unemployment hovers above 17%. Property prices have fallen approximately 8% from their peaks. The International Monetary Fund has placed the Chinese economy in its high uncertainty zone. Foreign investors pulled a record $15 billion out of China in the second quarter of 2024 alone. Junhua Zhang of the European Institute for Asian Studies offered a blunt assessment. For wealthy people who cannot generate more wealth in China, the only solution is to change their location. The economic miracle that created Chinese billionaires now threatens to destroy them. Economic instability forces wealth abroad. But the deepest fear driving this exodus isn't losing money. It's losing freedom itself. Entering the top 3, we reach the forces that transform migration from financial planning into survival strategy. At number 3 is the campaign that sent shockwaves through every boardroom in China: Xi Jinping's drive for common prosperity. In August of 2021, Xi Jinping addressed the Chinese Communist Party's Central Committee for Financial and Economic Affairs. In that single speech, he used the phrase common prosperity 15 times. For China's billionaires, those 2 words landed like a declaration of war. Common prosperity sounds benevolent, reducing inequality, spreading wealth more evenly, ensuring the benefits of economic growth reach ordinary citizens. But in the context of Xi's China, entrepreneurs heard something darker. The era of celebrating private wealth was ending. The party wanted its share. The crackdowns came swift and brutal. Alibaba, the e-commerce giant built by Jack Ma into one of the world's most valuable companies, received a $3.7 billion antitrust fine in April 2021. The entire after-school tutoring industry, worth an estimated $100 billion, was effectively destroyed overnight when Beijing banned for-profit academic tutoring. Zhang Bangxin of TAL Education, watched his fortune collapse from $13.3 billion to just $890 million, a 94% annihilation. Larry Shangdong Chen of GSX Techedu lost $15 billion in 6 months. But no case captured the new reality more dramatically than Jack Ma himself. In October 2020, just days before his Ant Group was set to complete a $37 billion initial public offering, the largest in history, Ma gave a speech criticizing Chinese financial regulators. Within days, authorities suspended the IPO. Ma vanished from public view for 3 months. When he finally resurfaced, everything had changed. He was forced out of the companies he founded. Ant Group's valuation collapsed by 75%, from $310 billion to $78 billion. Ma's personal fortune fell from a peak of $61 billion to roughly half that amount. He spent time in Japan, became a visiting professor at Tokyo University, kept his head down. Fred Hu, one of China's most prominent investors, captured the mood at a Bloomberg forum. This sense of insecurity in the Chinese entrepreneur community, he said, "I have not seen it like this since 1978. He was referring to the chaos following Mao Zedong's death, before China opened to the world. 4 decades of progress, and the fear had returned. Common prosperity threatens wealth. But our runner-up threatens something more fundamental, liberty itself." At number 2, we confront the phenomenon that keeps Chinese billionaires awake at night, the disappearing. We have lost contact with our chairman. This chilling announcement has become disturbingly routine in Chinese corporate communications. Billionaires who built empires, commanded armies of employees, and dined with political leaders simply vanish. No arrest announcement, no charges filed, no trial scheduled, just silence. Bao Fan embodied everything modern Chinese capitalism aspired to be. The founder of China Renaissance, described as possibly the best-liked and best-known person in the financial community in China, he had navigated the intersection of technology, finance, and government with apparent mastery. In February 2023, he disappeared. His company announced he was cooperating with certain authorities. A year later, they reported he had stepped down for health reasons to spend time with family. No further details, no explanation. He simply ceased to exist in public life. Reports indicated he had been trying to shift assets to Singapore before vanishing. The roll call of the disappeared reads like a directory of Chinese business achievement. Xiao Jianhua, who managed wealth for families of the communist elite, was abducted from a Hong Kong luxury hotel in 2017. He wasn't seen for 5 years before appearing in a Shanghai court and receiving a 13-year sentence. Ren Zhiqiang, property tycoon who called Xi Jinping a clown over pandemic handling, vanished in 2020 and received 18 years after a one-day trial. Whitney Duan, once China's wealthiest woman, was snatched from her Beijing apartment in 2017. Li Heijun, who headed a vast solar panel business and was once China's richest man, detained without explanation. He Jinbi, head of a major copper trading house, taken. Chen Xiaoji, founder of gaming platform Douyu, gone. This pattern gave birth to Run Xu, the run philosophy, the study of escape. The term exploded across Chinese social media in 2022, a darkly humorous acknowledgement that the safest strategy for successful Chinese might be getting out. On a single day in May 2022, searches for emigration on WeChat exceeded 100 million. Detailed guides proliferated on GitHub, one of the few foreign platforms not blocked in China, offering strategies for transferring assets and establishing foreign residency. When your colleagues disappear and your government offers no explanation, paranoia becomes prudence. And now, the number one reason Chinese billionaires are fleeing to Australia. It's not about taxes or lifestyle or investment returns. It's about the most basic human need: survival. Australia offers something Chinese billionaires cannot purchase at any price in their homeland: the rule of law, due process, the knowledge that the government cannot simply make you vanish because you offended the wrong official or accumulated too much visible success. Consider the contrast through one revealing case. Huang Xiangmo, the Chinese billionaire property developer, came to Australia in 2011. He established himself in a Mosman mansion worth nearly $13 million. He donated millions to Australian political parties. His family became Australian citizens. Then, Australian intelligence agencies raised concerns about his alleged connections to Chinese Communist Party influence operations. What happened next reveals everything about why Australia attracts fleeing Chinese wealth. Authorities canceled his permanent residency and barred his re-entry. They pursued him for $141 million in allegedly unpaid taxes. They investigated his political donations. Huang called Australia a giant baby and complained bitterly about his treatment. But here is the crucial point. He received legal process. He was notified of decisions. He could challenge them in court. He was not abducted from a hotel room. He did not vanish into a black jail. He was not sentenced to 18 years after a one-day trial. The system that rejected him still respected his fundamental rights. For Chinese billionaires watching colleagues disappear, this distinction means everything. Australia offers predictability, transparency, a government bound by laws it cannot arbitrarily ignore. In a world where being rich has become glorious and dangerous, Australia provides the ultimate refuge. Not just a place to protect wealth, but a place to protect life itself. The story of Chinese billionaires fleeing to Australia isn't ultimately about money. It's about something far more fundamental: the basic human desire for security, predictability, and freedom from fear. For decades, China's explosive economic growth created wealth on a scale the world had never seen. Entrepreneurs built empires, property developers transformed skylines, tech founders became global celebrities. Quote 2 wasn't just a slogan, it was a promise. Work hard, succeed, and your success will be celebrated. But under Xi Jinping, that promise has been broken. Common prosperity sounds benevolent until you watch your fellow billionaires disappear into black jails. Regulatory oversight seems reasonable until your $37 billion IPO is canceled overnight for giving the wrong speech. The system that created China's wealth now seems designed to confiscate it, or worse, to punish those who accumulated it. Australia offers the antidote. Not just the practical attractions: world-class education, clean air, gorgeous beaches, no inheritance tax, though those matter immensely. What Australia truly offers is something Chinese billionaires cannot buy at any price in their homeland: the rule of law. Due process: the knowledge that the government cannot simply make you vanish because you offended the wrong official or became too visibly successful. The numbers are staggering. Over 15,000 Chinese millionaires fleeing annually. 82,000 wealthy individuals relocated to Australia over 2 decades. Billions of dollars flowing into Australian property, businesses, and investment funds. Entire suburbs transformed into Chinese billionaire enclaves. But behind every number is a human story. A parent desperate to give their child a childhood with friends and sports instead of 77-hour study weeks. An entrepreneur watching colleagues disappear and calculating the odds. A family that built everything from nothing, now terrified it will be taken away. The _3_ phenomenon, the study of running away, captures a profound tragedy. China's most successful citizens, those who should be celebrated as engines of economic growth, instead feel compelled to flee. It's a damning verdict on the system Xi Jinping has built, and a powerful endorsement of what Australia represents. So, after that extensive journey through the forces driving the greatest wealth migration in modern history, what did you think of our countdown? Were you surprised by what's truly motivating China's fleeing billionaires? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this deep dive into the intersection of wealth, power, and survival compelling, don't forget to subscribe for more stories that reveal what's really happening behind the headlines. The exodus from China isn't slowing down, and Australia stands ready to welcome those seeking something their homeland can no longer provide: a future without fear.